Thank you for coming in, Preston.
Always a pleasure, Mr. President.
Please, have a seat. How much do you know about business and economics?
Nothing at all, sir, but I feel that I am about to be enlightened.
I know a little about business, but nothing at all about economics. I do, however, know people that know a lot about economics, and what it takes to keep a factory running. The factory would have shut down months ago if it was just orders for the Commonwealth. So the managers at the factory had to take some other orders. The orders get shipped out of the Commonwealth by Brahmin train, and after they leave, well, who knows where they end up. But the main point is that the factory gets the money it needs to keep running and making ammo for the Minutemen.
But some of those bullets end up getting shot back at us.
I don't deny that's a possibility, and I've got our intelligence agents looking into how we can stop this. But you do see the point I was trying to make?
Yes, Mr. President, but
I know you have concerns about these gun runners, but please, let the intelligence agents handle this. I promise you that they will do their best, okay?
very well, Mr. President.
Good. Believe me, we will get to the bottom of this, Preston. Trust me. I don't want anything bad to happen to him. He's a good man.
Captain Stewart, here to see you, ma'am.
Sometimes you need to sacrifice a piece to keep the game going.
The destruction of the Institute was a pivotal moment in the history of the Commonwealth. For the first time in 200 years, the Commonwealth found itself fully in charge of its own destiny, able to forge a future of peace and prosperity in the region. However, not all were pleased with these developments. Forces from inside and from outside the Commonwealth plotted the doom and destruction of the nascent state. In this three-part series, we will explore the last great challenge to the newborn republic, the rise of the mutant nation. In this episode, we will examine all the factors, mistakes, and miscommunication that would lead to what later would be known as the Glowing Sea War. Even as the rubble of the Institute cooled and a new government was proclaimed in Boston, there were those that were unhappy at how things had progressed in the Commonwealth. Enclave spies relayed the news to an anxious Enclave leadership in a distant underground bunker. The destruction of this shadowy organization known as the Institute was not unwelcome. However, news of a new regional government being set up was totally unacceptable. The Enclave already had enough problems dealing with the NCR and the Brotherhood of Steel. It did not need to add another pretender government, especially not a regional power allied to the Eastern Brotherhood of Steel. The Enclave would have to destroy this new state before it became too powerful. Unfortunately, direct military confrontation was out of the question. Military disasters out west and another more recent disaster in the capital wasteland had severely diminished the Enclave's military power. The Enclave could not risk another disaster. The idea of nuclear weapons had been suggested. Unfortunately, the Enclave had no access to nuclear weapons large enough to destroy an entire city. Some senior leaders pointed out that even if they did have such a weapon, destroying a major city would alert the Brotherhood of Steel to their existence. Attention from the Brotherhood was something that they desperately wanted to avoid. So the idea was shelved, for the moment. Colonel Kane of the Secret Service suggested recruiting surrogates from the wasteland to confront or even destroy the Commonwealth. Organized groups such as the Gunners would be induced to destroy the Commonwealth for a price. Enclave spies within the Commonwealth could recruit locals to do their bidding. With enough pressure from the outside and from within, Colonel Kane was sure that he could eventually bring down the Commonwealth with minimal risk to the Enclave. Not everyone in the Commonwealth was pleased with the formation of a national government for the region. Several old families had grown wealthy in providing scarce commodities at inflated prices. Increased security and competition threatened to drive prices down and cut into their profits. Others resented the huge influx of immigrants moving into the Commonwealth. They considered these outsiders as disrupting the established order that had existed for generations. Still others were open to making money in whatever possible way, whether illegal or not. They were more than willing to sell secrets or commit sabotage for a price. All of these individuals were more than receptive to those that would see the Commonwealth fall into anarchy once again. What happened between the sole survivor and Brian Virgil of the Institute is a matter of conjecture. Some say that the two argued and fought, and that the sole survivor had left Virgil trapped in the glowing sea. Others say that the sole survivor offered to help Virgil to leave the cave, but that Virgil angrily threw him out. Whatever the truth, Virgil was now trapped inside a cave in the middle of a radioactive wasteland with no way to escape. He would slowly starve to death in the cave. Faced with the prospects of a slow, lingering death, Virgil chose to change himself back into a super mutant so that he could at least hunt for food in the glowing sea. He continued his life in exile while harboring a festering resentment at those that destroyed his former home, waiting for his chance to execute his revenge. The new leaders of the Commonwealth knew that if they were to prosper, that they would have to eliminate a variety of threats in and around the city to provide a safe haven for the nation to prosper. In mid-2288, this process began with the complete elimination of the Gunner mercenaries in the Commonwealth. This campaign led to the Brotherhood Treaty in early 2289, and a joint campaign with the Brotherhood to obliterate the raider clans of the Commonwealth. As this campaign was proceeding, Enclave spies clandestinely began making contact with a variety of people inside the Commonwealth. Through one of these contacts, the Enclave learned about an Institute survivor somewhere deep in the glowing sea, a scientist that has a reason to hate the Commonwealth. In April of 2289, Enclave vertibirds began scouring the glowing sea, trying to pinpoint the location of this mysterious scientist. Finally, a surface patrol questioned some locals and found his cave. Although the first meeting almost resulted in a shootout, Virgil and the Enclave were able to come to an agreement concerning the Commonwealth. In Virgil, the Enclave has found an extremely intelligent scientist who is an expert in microbiology and supermutants. But more importantly, they found someone totally devoted to the destruction of the Commonwealth and who would act without hesitation. In the Enclave, Virgil has access to knowledge and resources that he could never have hoped to acquire on his own. An organization that would give him everything he needed to destroy the Commonwealth. Enclave scientists met with Virgil to discuss possible plans. After a few weeks, Virgil suggested a radical idea that would create an army of supermutants to crush the Commonwealth. Using his anatomical knowledge of supermutants, Virgil proposed broadcasting an electric signal by antenna that would draw all supermutants of the wastelands to the glowing sea. The Enclave would use local relay stations across the country to transmit the signal far and wide. He proposed recruiting not just supermutants of the Commonwealth, but to induce supermutants throughout the wasteland to join him in the glowing sea. Enclave personnel began bringing in crates of electronics to Virgil's cave so he could construct his long-distance signal tower. Meanwhile, an assault team of Enclave soldiers cleared the area of the glowing sea to begin construction of Virgil's supermutant camp. By late June, the signal began to broadcast, and the supermutants of the Commonwealth responded. With the humans of the Commonwealth consumed by the radar war, nobody at first noticed that one by one all the supermutant tribes left and headed south into the glowing sea. Once their absence became more apparent, some in the Commonwealth wanted to send out an expedition to the glowing sea to stamp out the supermutant menace. This idea was met by widespread resistance. The Brotherhood was anxious to return to the capital wasteland and put down various mercenary and raider groups. Many in the Commonwealth wanted nothing to do with the glowing sea. It was known as a zone of high radiation, and it was expected that there would be more deaths caused by radiation poisoning than by supermutants. Some still wanted to mount a major expedition to wipe out the supermutants, arguing that they represented an existential threat to humanity. The Commonwealth government, however, would only agree to put up a few more outposts on the edge of the glowing sea. The government wanted to focus on the reconstruction of Boston and to expand the Commonwealth north and west, rather than deal with some wayward supermutants. The general populace was more focused on working to build the Commonwealth and wanted prosperity. They would all later come to regret this decision. The signal spread out, and across America the message was received. From California, the Mojave, Appalachia, the capital wasteland, and from all points in between they came. First as individuals, then in small bands and tribes, not knowing where they were headed or why, only knowing that they must answer this primordial call. And as the mutants slowly gathered, Enclave spies made deals with gun runners and factory executives in the Commonwealth to buy the guns and ammunition that the supermutants would need. Shipments of ammunition, crates of old guns, and other supplies were shipped by caravan far to the west of the Commonwealth. There they would be dropped off, seemingly in the middle of nowhere, only to be retrieved by others late that night. Executives at the Lexum Corporation didn't know who was buying these things. All they knew is that they were being paid immediately and in caps, and that was all that mattered. Some in the Commonwealth, like Preston Garvey, suspected that something was happening deep in the glowing sea, and that someone in the Commonwealth was supporting them. But he could not prove anything. All he could do is man his frontier outpost. Meanwhile, Enclave spies continued their work in the Commonwealth. Posing as traders, they traveled across the Commonwealth and mapped out Minutemen bases and positions on the southern border. All these findings were relayed to the Enclave, who then passed them to Virgil. As new groups of mutants arrived, leaders began to emerge in the mutant village. Among them was Vicious, once a lieutenant in the Master's army. Vicious barely escaped the destruction of the cathedral in 2162. He and his band of supermutants roamed the California wastes, trying to hide from the Western Brotherhood of Steel and the NCR Rangers, trying to survive as best as possible. In 2290, he and his followers heard the call from the east and began their long trek, crossing the country to reach the glowing sea and the strange signal. In late 2292, they finally arrived in the glowing sea. Vicious met with Virgil and the other supermutant leaders. Virgil explained his idea in drawing all of them to the glowing sea. Together they began getting the super mutants ready for war. As time passed, Vicious began to emerge as one of the more forceful leaders within the mutant army. Vicious imposed a brutal discipline on the irrational and passionate mutants, something that most had not known until that time. East Coast mutants were not as intelligent as their West Coast cousins, but he found that with enough violence, that even they would learn to obey. He forced them to function as an army rather than a mindless mob. While most trained, others went out hunting and killed every creature that they could find in the glowing sea to feed the growing ranks of the super mutants. Soon the hunting parties began to wander outside the glowing sea looking for food. Some of the southern Commonwealth settlements began to see super mutant activity. Vicious put a stop to this, as he did not want the Commonwealth to have any advance warning of what was to come. By late 2295, the mutant army had grown to thousands. To some of the older first-generation super mutants, this brought back memories of the old days in the Master's army. They now had a sense of purpose and a cause worth fighting for. In the super mutant camp they gathered, training with a common purpose. Old rivalries now forgotten. All the distant tribes gathered. Californians with Appalachians. Commonwealth with Mojave. All dreaming of one last war. A war to kill the humans out of the Commonwealth. A war to turn the rubble of this land into a new homeland for super mutants. A war to bring about the age of the super mutant. In May of 2296, Enclave spies in the Commonwealth reported that the Minutemen were fully engaged in New Hampshire. Most of the regular army was fighting in the north, and only a couple of regular units were left to guard the Commonwealth. This was the opportunity that the super mutant army had been waiting for. Vicious held a final council of war with all the senior super mutant leaders. All agreed that everything was ready and the time had come. 3 years of preparation had remade the super mutant army. They would never be well-disciplined troops, but at least they would carry out his orders and not just do whatever they wanted to do. Vicious had confidence that his army could take the Commonwealth. On the dawn of June 1st, Vicious stood on the ridge overlooking the crater of Adam's settlement. He gave the signal and launched his army to begin the conquest of the Commonwealth.